All right, so a total of 422,906 candidates from 12,562 public and private junior high schools across the country took part in this year's basic education certificate examination, which ended last Friday. All right. This figure represents an increase of 31,864 over last year's total number of 391,082. The B.E.C.E is the first major external examination for students, or if you like, pupils, in Ghana's education system. Well, as the over 420,000 JHS graduates await their results, what can parents and what do to ensure students are kept busy so they do not engage in social vices? And for those who do not make the grades for admission in SHS, what can they do? Well, joining me to give us some answers to these is Anis Hafa. He's with Gifted and Talented Education. He's also an author, and he has a column in the Daily Graphic called Education Matters. Is it out every day?
It's out once a week, and it's been going on for, I think I've written for the past 3 years, but I haven't done it this year because I'm writing a book called Transforming Education for Quality Leadership and prosperity. So that's what I'm working on. I hope it will be out sometime this year.
All right, and we will be glad to review it here.
Well, I have one with me now, which I'll give to you when we leave.
All right.
Good.
Okay. All right, so also Dr. Femi Inzegu is the Director of Programs, B.E.C.E Foundation. What's your foundation into?
Right, B.E.C.E is Enhancing Youth and Education and Health, a foundation that really has a vision of enabling young people and building their capacity to allow them to make informed choices about their health, about their education, about their career choices, and really to empower them with the confidence to do that.
Okay.
And so we run a program in partnership with industry, parents, the interns themselves, and of course led by our foundation, to place these young people after school, after they graduate, like the number that you just alluded to, into industry, various types of industries that align with their future career aspirations, just so that they have a sense of whether is this right for me, and so it helps them, it keeps them engaged, they feel a sense of confidence, and most importantly they have mentors working with them to build and develop.
So how long have you been running this?
We've been, we were established in 2007 by Mrs. Adjoa Mana, who is a retired UN social scientist and specialist on reproductive health. And we are social scientists, we have psychologists on board, and we work with children in the workplace to enable them to be essentially engaged during these fallow periods.
All right, so Anis Hafa, you're very familiar with the Ghanaian curricula. What's the whole idea of the B.E.C.E? What is this supposed to do to children?
Yeah, what the B.E.C.E does is like a barometer in terms of what the basic educational requirements are for this country. Every country has one. Ours is the B.E.C.E. But what it also does is that it gives us an idea of the kind of people that we are preparing for the future, especially as far as the basics to read and write, read well, to write and write well, to read and understand what you read, and also numeracy. So these are the basic things. Of course, we have also science, some science subjects. Computers have now been introduced into the system and so on. But it also begins to prepare the Ghanaian mindset to deliberate in our democracy. So when you have civic education and history, geography, it gives us an idea of the people that we are preparing. But also, besides the B.E.C.E, I think it's also time now to begin to also educate adults, and also parents. So somewhere along the line, we have to begin to look at how we are uplifting the whole society. Our focus should not just be on the young people, because a person who can read and write properly as a parent invariably will also enhance B.E.C.E scores for their students.
Okay, but Femi, do you get a sense that we're doing this, the B.E.C.E is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing?
I think that it's aspirational, it's working in that direction, it's not a perfect system. But as Anis was saying, I do think that there is a very strong partnership here, which is what we try to at the B.E.C.E Foundation, that we get parents very much focused on what you need to be doing to support your children. We work with the children. We go to industry and say, for instance, we have partnerships with people in the medical field like Akai House, women lawyers, FIDA, the Federation of Women Lawyers. We work with Star Alliance, which is an airline. We work here at Joy FM. We have some of our interns also here. And the idea
Joy
is...
FM is a course.
Sorry, Joy FM course. This is Joy TV. So what we do is we say, we convince the CEOs. 3M is a medical center at the ANC. These people who head these organizations are strong and powerful mentoring people and role models. So they work with these kids and say, what is it you want to do in your own life? How do you want to advance your own life? Because we recognize that when you work with the child, you're not just impacting the child, you're impacting their families, their communities, you know, and the wider nation. And that is the aspiration, to work together with these children, that wherever the B.E.C.E, where the education leaves off, that there's an extra being put into that child in terms of confidence and skill building. Yeah.
You know, I see a lot of national service personnel, you know, as interns. I don't see a lot of basic education certificate graduates being interns.
Yes, that's true.
Was it part of the plan initially to have them go and test the waters?
Well, you know, we don't have a plan for students who've just done the B.E.C.E. So this dialogue has to continue. But then, you know, in the U.S., when I was teaching there, we had what we call the summer school. Here, every day is summer, but we can have vacation school. But what it means is that after you've gone through the tedium of, let's say, grammar, instruction, and that sort of thing, it's time for us to begin to look at every district and how we can begin to incorporate some vocational abilities in the B.E.C.E. students, those who've left on high school. And I'm talking about, I mean, basic art. It doesn't have to be a grammar type, reading and writing type thing. It can be, let's say, photography, computer sciences, web designs. It can be drama, it can be music, learning to play a musical instrument. It could be a flute, it could be basic drums, you know, and also even doing, let's say, plays, drama. All of that now have to be incorporated into the Ghana education curriculum. And also, like I keep saying, every district has to be self-sustaining in that kind of enterprise. Because, you know what they say, the devil finds work for idle hands. But then we cannot allow 422,000 people out on the street, because that's what happens year after year. And we get hypocritical because we don't seem to think that there's a need there. But it has to be incorporated into the educational system itself.
Whose responsibility should that be?
Sweetheart, it's got to be the government, and it's got to be the Ministry of Education, and it's got to be the people who are in charge of the district, the DCEs and the rest of them. Because they established the buildings are already there. There are teachers there. But what we have to do as a nation is begin to make noise that within this time, August, September, July, August, we're not going to have our kids on the streets. And then it has to be incorporated. You see, the important thing, though, when we talk about young people, is that when we place people in responsible positions as heads of the districts, they have to know what they're doing, and we have to make a projection, a visionary projection to the future, and say that we can't let our kids on the street. But these would be some of the easiest things to do. I've seen examples in the north where there are traditional dancers who perform during the what I call the vacation time. We have to begin to incorporate that. And then the beautiful thing that we have in Ghana is that every district is different. So we can even begin to develop elements of competition of the young people on a district-to-district basis. So in this district, what is it that you're going to do this July and August? Let's have some kind of competition. But the important thing is for us as adults in the society to let the children know that we have our eyes on them. And that we are not just talking, we are going to create situations in which they can begin to manifest themselves in very superior ways.
So is it just finding them something to do so that they are busy during this period, or it's finding them something that will open up their minds to what to expect in the future?
I would say that it's a combination of those things, definitely. I think that opening up their minds is a critical part. You want to grow you want to stretch the intellect of the child, of the young person. And so it's not, I agree with that there has to be a broadening of the arts and the engagement of young people in all sorts of intellectually stimulating activities. I think also there's a need for training such as on leadership skills, responsibilities that people take on board. There's a training, there's an awareness raising that has to happen with the parents, because it's not only the government's responsibility, it's really a four-part responsibility here. Parents have a very, very big role to play, but they also need to be aware of what those roles are, and as do the young people. And so the young people taking the initiative to even expand into areas beyond what has been prescribed by government, I think is an essential one. And you find that. You find innovative projects of young people here and there getting together over this period of August and July. And I know a group of people who get together and clean up their area. And people reward them with a little money here that enables them to go and do different things. But it's, yes, get engaged, let your mind be stretched, know that your intellectual capacities are beyond what you've learned and there's a huge potential for it, and then learn how to take the responsibility for yourself and your society, your community.
So these kids are very young at this age. I mean, they haven't been to SSS. What is it that they can do to get them to senior high school? And indeed, because you know, usually it's only the only option really is the senior high school, but there are other technical training institutions, but we just focus our minds on the Infantipim, the Presex, the Achimota School. What are the options?
I went to Infantipim, so I hope you are not knocking us that way. You know, that's the question. There have to be options. And even if you look at the 422,000 young people, how many of them can get admission to those schools? And what happens to the rest of them? We know what happens to the rest of them. They're out on the streets, hustling, peddling other people's waste from the production lines and so on. But again, and I like what Femi was saying, that the time has come where parents themselves, you know, have to form whatever you want to call them, unions, cooperatives, and so on, and make sure that certain things happen. Because invariably, if you leave things to the people in government positions, we know what they're capable of doing, what they're not doing. I mean, here, typically, people are comfortable sitting in offices. They are not driven. They don't reach out. You know, people want to be in air-conditioned houses and that sort of office and so on. But again, I like what Femi was saying in terms of parents now ganging together. I want to use the word, ganging together to make their voices heard. But the other thing is this. Besides the grammar type education that we have in Fancy and places like that, the time has come where I think you mentioned where there has to be vocational abilities. That's why I keep mentioning things that people can do. Now, again, Ghana is lucky in the sense that we can begin to look at the best practices in other places. I mean, when I was growing up in the US, I mean, I would take summer classes, and not so much academics, but things that you can do. You know, so this has to happen. Because even... Why
don't we find things like that valuable? You know, it's almost like a waste of time.
Yeah.
You're supposed to be reading your books.
But I'll tell you, but things have changed. Oh, you know this joke about a father who came home and was looking for his kid, and the kid wasn't there. He said, hey, where's Kojo? So Kojo is out playing soccer. Also good. I thought he was here wasting his time doing grammar work, you know. So, but these are the things now. Hands-on type training, key to a developing country like this. But what I'm saying is this, when we begin to look at successful nations, see, that's what I'm saying, that for us, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Let's look at what other countries are doing for their own children. Yeah. I was saying the other time that...
copy.
Yeah, the copy thing. I was saying the other time that I was in Rome some time ago, and for a meeting, I didn't see any young people on the streets. So I said, where are the young people? So they are in school. They are learning crafts. They are learning to use their hands. They are learning to do something useful. But here, again, in our African culture, where we have absolutely no respect for our young people, now that is disheartening. You know, we talk to our children anyhow. We talk to young people anyhow. Hey, brah, and the names that we call them. All of that has to change. We are moving into the 21st century, and we, the older people, have to be sophisticated enough to know that how we bring up the young people is how they're going to grow up. So this is key. Now, this dialogue, again, has to continue, because this is the time where every young person, you know, when I was growing up and walk aimlessly in the street, they'll say, Kobolo. I mean, have nothing to do. That has to come back. But again, it has to be a well-drawn program that is being pushed by social welfare, the Ministry of Education, and so on, to make sure that now we have our hands on the young people, and then we'll not let them go astray. That's our responsibility. But I also mentioned another thing, corporate social responsibility. I'm doing a program on CTFM where they are promoting right away contests, you know, so you have all kids being part of it. I think every corporation has to now begin to look at what it is that we can do. Some of your own best practices as corporations, how can we instill that discipline into our young people? So now, it's just not parents and government, but we also have to bring corporations in, because the corporations have the discipline and the wherewithal to make some of these things happen.
And that's essentially what we do at the AA Foundation, because we work with a whole range of industry, various groups, both in the private sector, in the government sector, to actually open up their resource base to these young people.
But what sort of children do you get in your foundation?
Well, we have a range, really. Most of them, though, are children who are going to go on to further education. So they're that track of people going on to...
Okay, but are they children from private or public institutions?
Oh, from public institutions, all of them. All of them are from public institutions. And all of them would be the socioeconomic group you would describe as, you know, your emerging or your lower middle socioeconomic group, definitely.
What sort of difference have you seen? Because you've been doing this since 2007. What sort of difference does it make in their lives?
Interesting. It's an interesting question, an amazing one. And actually, I was trying to get some of the kids to come down. All of these kids have gone on to further education in some form or the other. They go back to those industries when they're during the summer program, summer situation, and are employed. They themselves talk about how it's transformed their lives. Their parents are much more involved. They have a vision of the future. They have a sense of responsibility, not only for themselves, but to their communities. And you see them working in their communities in the summer. It's a transformation of life that is, and we're actually documenting that now to actually share it so much more widely about what the possibilities are. I'd like just to also mention one last group of young people that we often forget, and those are young people with disabilities who are in the system. Across the world, and particularly in Africa, we forget that group of individuals. They have even more of a hurdle to overcome in terms of being able to access the resources that we're talking about. And whereas we look at other countries to see what best practice is, there is obviously a unique Ghanaian culture which we need to tap into in defining what these programs are. The essential issue is keep children engaged, but engaged in a way that empowers them, gives them a sense of responsibility and worth, that you are valuable, you are important, you make up between 15 and 35, we're talking about 35% of our population in Ghana. And you make up a very vital group that's going to define the future of this country. We think you are a huge and valuable resource, and to treat them that way and to ensure that they have an avenue to be able to express the skills that they have.
So, you know, whether we like it or not, there are still some parents who will not be there for their children. There will be some young people who are watching us right now. Tell them what they can do on their own without their parents' support.
Well, what I want to do, it's what you look at is always look at course outlines. What is it that you are studying in school? And what I'm suggesting to young people from B.E.C.E, senior high school, also to university level, is to begin to target the course outline and begin to identify a particular course or skill that you are very interested in, and then make it your life's work. You don't need your mother to tell you, you don't need your father to tell you, you don't need your teacher to tell you, but there's a structure. And these days, you know, with Google, there's no information in the world that you cannot have. So the time has come where we are not just, and this is my address to young people, this is a time where we don't just have to repeat information, the rote learning, because Google can do better than all of us put together. But the thing is this, like Obama used to say, develop a motive for yourself, a motive, M-O-T-I-F. Develop a motive for yourself. Who am I? What is it that I want to do? And to each their own. And I keep saying this, from a program that I was doing in the US called the GATE program, Gifted and Talented Education, we made sure that every single child in the school district, even class 1, they are working on a project, you know.
What sort of projects?
It's up to them. I mean, it can be a project where, let's say, you're going around and taking pictures of trees that bear particular kinds of fruits.
Okay.
It can be a particular kind of animals that live in your community. It could be a particular kind of architecture in your area. It could be an experiment. You drop egg into, let's say, cider or dilute sulfuric acid. What is it that happens? Young people who are connecting electrical circuits. I mean, there's a whole slew of activities. But the important thing is this. As we begin to get engaged in, how do you call it, hands-on activities, that's when we begin to learn properly, because we have an emotional commitment to what we're doing. We decide what we're going to do. We are the ones who are discovering and picking up the bits and pieces that will make a certain experiment succeed. And then it's a big deal in the schools, because what they do is that they invite the councilmen, the assemblymen, corporations, come and see what the young people are doing. And you'll be surprised. 6-year-old kid standing in front of adults doing a presentation. This was the question that I had in mind. How do you do A, B, and C? And this is how I resolved it. And they'll ask questions, they respond. These build what we call the affective skills or affective competencies. You're not afraid to look at people. One of the most disappointing things that I see here in Ghana, teaching here, is that young people are so shy, so boastful, because they've never been in a position to really be assertive. It's always what someone has told you and you have to repeat it. Now, if you forget to repeat it and your memory falls short, then your confidence is down. But we don't need to lose confidence that way. People are more artistic, people are more empowered, to use your word, when it's something that they themselves are doing. So that has to be in this country. Every school needs to have a project, every class needs to have a project, and every single individual in the country, that's a school going age, should have a project. Because we are not going to live our lives repeating other people's conclusions. It's time for us to begin to do experiments where we begin to now develop our own conclusion and share those conclusions. That is the wave of the future. And you see what will happen in this country in 5 years.
How can parents get this whole idea that we need to start teaching our children to learn skills? I mean, it doesn't mean that if you're learning how to sew, for instance, then you're going to end up, you know, like a seamstress, or, you know, like, because sometimes when you're learning a certain skill, people think, oh, this is what you want, really? This is what you want to do? You know, not thinking that if I learn how to do this, it could open up my mind, you know, to do other things and to understand more things.
And to just to add to what you're saying, there's an example that comes to mind of a young person I know who learned how to cut hair and paid part of his fees throughout school by cutting the hair of his fellow students. So what you say is absolutely true. Parents need to be made more aware. I think there's definitely a role for the schools. The schools have got to have a change of mindset in the way that they look at and interact with young people. And so that the projects that Asi was talking about earlier on are very much about, you start that early, you start it early on. What is the project that your school is going to work on over these 2 months, so that people can get involved in it? And it doesn't necessarily have to be a cognitive skill in that sense. It could actually be, like I said, the group of kids who said that their area is too dirty, they want to do something about it. And so they got together and started cleaning and beautifying, and then planted flowers. So it's a range of activity that you could be involved in. To get parents more involved, I think, again, not only a task of government, but like organizations such as ours. Like, we make it a part of our project that parents have to come in with their kids. And I would say, parents who are interested, please contact us, A Foundation. We're happy, you know, to actually, young people who want to get involved. We are on the net, www.ayafoundation.com.
And Aya is spelled?
EYEH. And it's the acronym for Enhancing Youth Education and Health.
Okay.
And we're online. Give us a call, and we can work with young people and work with their parents. But we're a drop in the bucket. It's got to be a much expanded program where schools take that on board, that you know, this is part and parcel of the curriculum that we deliver, and that part of that is to prepare children during these fallow months, so to speak, with ideas and opportunities to expand their skills.
Okay, so and it's not everybody would suddenly pass the B.E.C.E. Is it, or would it be over for people who don't make the grades?
Now, that's $1 million question. I'm glad you've asked it. You know, we have two sets of systems. One is called the linear type of education. The linear type of education is where we go from JHS to senior high school to university for a first degree, a second degree, or a master's degree and a PhD. Now, you realize that even those who are going to the universities, only about 2% of young people in this country who would be there. So now what happens to the bigger picture? Now, this is the other area of education we call the organic type. The organic type is where you begin to decide something that you want to do right from the beginning. And again, it starts with this project that I'm talking about. It's not everybody wants to go to university. Now, I remember I was in Boston a couple of years ago to do a brain scan. The young man who did the brain scan for me was 18 years old. This person has not even gone to university yet. He's finished after high school. He finished 2 years of what the Americans called community college. Now, while he was working in the community, while he was working in the hospital, he was now back to school to do his first degree, and he was using his skills in the hospital to pay his school fees. This is the wave of the future. So what I keep saying is that an organic system is where we realize that it's not everyone who go into the university, but they have contributions to make. And then the examples are around us. Look at some of the brightest minds that are doing innovative things. They are not university material, or they chose not to be university material. Right from the get, they knew what they wanted.
Yeah, but when we want examples like that, we always go to the Bill Gates, the Steve Jobs, and do we have local people like that?
Yes,
Yes, we do.
But then again, now, Bill Gates decided at the age of 9 that there's something I want to do. That was his project. And these are projects that he was doing for his school. How do we do is say that we are able to develop software to help the administration? That was his question. So what I'm saying that every kid in Ghana, and let me tell you, I've taught so many nationalities. Ghanaian children are no different from any other children. As far as
are we slow? Because that's what I get.
Are we slow? We are slow because sometimes the tradition suppresses the mindset of our young people. You know, we physically abuse them. We emotionally abuse them. Weren't you call names when you're growing up? I mean, I grew up in a village, Tutuka, you'd be surprised the names that they called us. 2 times 2, say 5, and you get it on your head with insults. Now, how do you develop cognitively that way? So what I'm saying is this. Again, let's look up. Let's not look down. Some of the worst things that we say is that we are doing better than somebody else. We have to look up and see what the great people are doing. So those Zuckerbergs will never fade from the scene. But for us in Ghana, we have to cut our coat according to our size. So what I'm saying is this. We have to now identify, this should be promoted through the educational system. Look, what is the point? Anytime, come September, go to any school in this country, from class 1 all the way to university, people are sitting down listening. That is the nature of the development of our passivity. We'll sit down and we'll listen. What I'm saying is, especially at the university level, or any other level, is that 1 hour of instruction should result in 2 or 3 hours of practical things. The things that we've learned, and what are we going to do with it? And there are projects that I've done in this country where students who have not even done B.E.C.E. are doing community work, checking people's blood pressure, because they learn to do that. You know, there are places where, in some of the schools, where young people are writing their own literature, their own books in primary. So when they're in JHS, their books are being taught as bona fide materials for literature in the school. These are the hands-on type things that we need to do. This talking is too much. Now, the worst part is that after a person has sat down, listening and talking and listening and talking, and we put them in a department in any of our government agencies, they do the same thing. Because that's how they've been brought up, and they are not going to deviate from the way they were brought up. We need to begin to grow doers. People are on their hands doing things. I mean, if you look at this country, and they say there are no jobs, it's the biggest fallacy. There are jobs, but we are not doing them. People are paid to do jobs, are not used to doing jobs because they were not trained to get things done. That is one. And also, we also have to begin to look at new products that have not been developed before. We want to begin to look at new services that have not been, that haven't come out before. These are all innovative techniques that are being used in other countries, and we have to bring them all back to bear in Ghana, because our young people are just as bright as any.
Can I just also add a quick thing to that?
Yeah, sure.
There are schools within Ghana where that type of philosophy has been adopted.
Yeah, you can talk back. But that's only in the privileged schools.
It is very much so. But these are examples that we can pull and use and share more widely, so that there is learning also going on within our own country. It is not always external. That I think that's a very important part, because there are examples of people and schools who do it differently, and that really should be capitalized on.
And I don't know who came up with the idea that when you talk back, it means that you're being disrespectful.
Well,
so even when they have questions, or when they can counter what you've said as a teacher, nobody wants to object.
And that's a legacy of a past too, of a educational past, that a system that we inherited, where you used to, which has since moved on in those parts of the world, but which still has remained static in this part of the world.
You see, it's not talk back. It's called a two-way street. We are having discussions. I mean, look at the way we raise. I mean, I'll tell how I raise my children. When I have to make a decision, I pull them in, say, this is what we need to do, and I'm suggesting this. Do you have an idea? Let's look. And I say, don't just look at me as a daddy who makes all the decisions for us. We all have to participate. And invariably, you're going to have a younger person whose idea is better than yours. And then you want to be specific and say, my goodness, this is what I was going to do. Yours is better. It's not talking back. It's being engaged in a dialogue that develops young people's abilities to be effective. That my opinions matter. But then I think Feli made a point that this was a colonial heritage. But guess what? It was our traditional heritage too. Except that, like she's saying, those who introduced it to us in an academic fashion have changed. But we now, our traditions are making it so difficult. You know, some of the proverbs that we use in this country, where young people cannot aspire to be anything except older people. But older people, more or less, are good many people. If you look at the country where it's going and our independence since 1957, we are not keeping pace with development. So now we have to begin to look at how we are really growing our young people and letting them know that that future that we are fighting for starts from right now. So let's begin to see the role that you will play in a positive way, and it has to be part of the dialogue in every school. But then, again, the work that I do, the most difficult part is trying to get teachers to begin to understand that we have to now pay attention to the ideas that are being expressed by young people, and we have to help them to do the ideas better. The other places where I've gone, you speak to young people, do you have a question? After you've spoken for 30 minutes, so nobody has a question, it's abnormal, you know, and we cannot continue that. There are questions everywhere, but it takes an inquiring mind to begin to adapt themselves to see what a good question is. But all of that has to be taught in school. How do we ask questions? With when, how, where, why not, what if? These are things that have to be brought in. These are what we call the critical thinking skills. It's not memorizing stuff and reproducing them for the teacher.
And as I want us to have another discussion, probably next week. I wanted to, because when you raised the issue about the teachers, I thought, okay, because how do we get the teachers to think this is not just a job that fetches you money at the end of the month? I mean, this is a commitment to change lives. How do we get teachers, you know, in that kind of, you know.
Absolutely.
And I also want to interact with some of your students because I'm interested in what you do. But for today, I would like to say thank you for being here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, and you stay with the AM show. We'll come back with a lot more before 9.